Hello everyone, welcome to History at Bedtime. Tonight, we're going to step softly into a world of marble streets, bustling markets, and grand palaces where life was carefully measured by rank, title, and wealth. A world where the rhythm of everyday life, whether for a humble slave or a powerful emperor, reveals the subtle, sometimes surprising patterns of society and how people found joy, struggle, and meaning within them. A gentle warning: this story may make the past feel startlingly vivid. You probably won't make it through this day without feeling transported into another time. And that's exactly the point. Let curiosity soften the edges of the present. Before we go further, leave a comment with your location and local time. It's a quiet way to connect our imaginations across the world. And if you enjoy letting history unfold slowly, soothingly, and curiously, please like this video and subscribe. Here, there's no rush, only stories waiting to carry you gently through time. Take a deep, calming breath. Let your shoulders relax. Let the day slip softly away. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. Tonight, we will wander from the shadowed corridors of servants' quarters to the glittering halls of emperors, observing the lives of people at every level of Roman society. We'll see how daily routines, ambitions, and social rules shape not only survival, but also the subtle ways in which power, influence, and human spirit intertwined along the way. We'll uncover surprising customs, small joys, and rare freedoms in a world that was as structured as it was alive with color, sound, and possibility. The night is calm in Rome. You stand in the quiet of the city, the air soft against your skin, cool but not cold. The faint scent of wood burning from distant homes wafts toward you, and in the distance you hear the gentle crackle of a fire flickering in a brazier, as though the city itself is softly exhaling. The streets, once bustling with the sounds of horses' hoofs and voices, are now calm. It's that delicate moment between dusk and deep night when everything slows down. Here, in the heart of the empire, Rome stretches out before you. Its marble streets, its towering temples, its grand homes, and its humble hovels, each one telling its own story. And as the sounds of the city fade into a gentle hush, you can almost hear the whispers of the people who built it all. But Rome wasn't always so grand. You could say it began, much like anything, as a simple idea, a collection of disparate tribes struggling for survival, bound together by their need to control the Tiber River and the surrounding hills. Fast forward a few centuries, and here you are, standing at the very center of one of the greatest empires the world has ever known. The streets, bathed in the glow of flickering torchlight, are filled with a history that stretches back to those early days. The same city that was once home to ragtag soldiers now houses emperors, senators, merchants, and, of course, slaves. Ah, yes, the slaves. The ones who built those beautiful roads you're walking on. They're probably the last people you'd think of when you look at the grandeur of the Forum or the Colosseum. But there they are, working in silence, contributing to the empire's glory, often with no recognition and little reward. But hey, you probably won't make it through the day without encountering one of them. So let's take a deeper look. Now, if you take a moment to look around, you'll notice a mix of faces. Some belong to people you would recognize, men and women of rank, their clothes rich with dye, their sandals polished and well made. Others, however, are the unseen, the workers of the empire, slaves, freedmen, and those just a step away from being part of the Roman elite. You gently tap your foot on the cobblestones, the sound soft beneath you. It's strange, isn't it, that in a city so grand, there's always someone beneath the surface, someone whose existence is often ignored, but they are there nonetheless. People like Marcus, a lowly household slave who spends his days sweeping marble floors, carrying messages, and waiting for the occasional glimpse of kindness from his master. You feel a little colder as you think of Marcus, the quiet hero in this epic story. Historians still debate whether the slaves in Rome were treated worse than those in other parts of the ancient world. On one hand, they were given basic sustenance, and on rare occasions, the promise of freedom. On the other, many worked until they dropped, their lives wholly owned by their masters. As you walk deeper into the city, the picture of a divided society becomes clearer. Take a moment to pause and imagine the sound of a slave's life, the quiet scrape of a broom, the soft hiss of food cooking in a master's kitchen. These are sounds you might never hear, but they form the very rhythm of Rome. It's a slow beat, a hum in the background of a grand city. So, before we start, if you haven't yet, go ahead and gently tap that like button and subscribe for more historical lullabies. And if you're in the mood for a little interaction, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. Time travels funny that way. You get to drift through eras. Yet the clock keeps ticking. The streets of Rome are busy once more, but not everyone shares the same role in the bustling scene. As you walk along, you notice the groups, distinctions that are drawn not just by wealth, but by birth, privilege, and, at times, fate. There are the patricians, those proud families with roots deep in Roman soil, whose bloodlines are as ancient as the city itself. They stand tall, garbed in flowing togas, their shoes polished, their expressions serious. Their lives are cushioned by status, wealth, and land. You can see them now, walking briskly through the forum. No time for idle chatter, no time to stop and gaze at the architecture around them. They're used to it. Their world is one of meetings, decisions, power. It's a world that doesn't concern itself much with the common person, and they rarely, if ever, mingle with the plebeians. Speaking of plebeians, you pass a group of them now, workers, traders, and farmers, their faces weathered by the sun, their clothes simpler, more worn than those of the patricians. They too are part of the city's daily rhythm. It's a rhythm that's lived in the marketplaces, in the fields, and even in the darker corners of Rome, places where no one wants to look, but where most people's lives unfold. These are the men and women who help build Rome, but rarely get to sit in the seats of power. The plebeians make up the backbone of the empire, and yet they are often forgotten in history. In fact, there's something poetic about their existence, isn't there? They do not command legions or hold grand banquets in marble halls. But without them, the empire would crumble to dust. They are the unsung heroes, those who, over centuries, fought tooth and nail for their rights. But for all their struggle, their lives remain a mix of hope and hardship. Hope for a better future, hardship at the hands of the more privileged classes. It's a strange thing how some people can have everything and others almost nothing. But then again, this is Rome. The very idea of fairness here is something of a joke, and yet you can almost feel their resilience as they walk past you, men and women who will fight for their rights, perhaps through rebellion, perhaps through negotiation, but always with the hope of someday rising above their station. It's a beautiful thing, this hope, even if it's often crushed under the weight of centuries of tradition. Historians still debate whether the plebeians were ever truly free, or if they were merely pawns in a game where the stakes were far higher than any of them realized. Were they slaves to the system, or were they simply caught in a cycle of labor and survival, destined to never see the heights of Roman society? It's a question that doesn't have a clear answer, much like many things in Rome. And then there are the freedmen, those who were once slaves, but who have earned their freedom through various means. Some were lucky, some were skilled, and some just had the fortune of a kind master. These freedmen walk with a strange sense of pride, as if they know they've made it, but they also know that they'll never truly escape their past. It's a hard thing to be a freedman. You're not quite a full citizen, but you're not a slave anymore either. You're somewhere in the middle, living in the spaces between the grand structures of Rome. But still, you walk with your head held high, because in this city, just surviving is an achievement in itself. As you move further into the city, it's impossible to ignore the way these divisions exist side by side. Patricians walk past plebeians, freedmen walk past slaves. Everyone is going somewhere, yet they all exist in different worlds. It's a striking thing, the way society in Rome is built, layer upon layer, each class a different stratum of power, wealth, and privilege. And somewhere, in the shadows of this vast empire, someone is always struggling to climb higher. Someone is always fighting for a way out. And so, you step forward into the heart of Rome. You feel the weight of the city on your shoulders, and yet you can't help but be swept along by its power. After all, this is Rome, the city that, despite its divisions, somehow managed to bring the world to its feet. And in the end, isn't that the great irony? That the empire that created such vast inequality also gave birth to such extraordinary achievement. The night draws in around you, the soft breeze rustling through the trees. You can hear the distant hum of the city, and you realize that this, too, is part of Rome's story. The story of a city that was, in so many ways, divided but also united by its sheer will to survive. The sun is now low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the sprawling city. The streets, once again filled with the hustle of day-to-day life, seem almost quieter in this light, as though the city is drawing a deep breath before the night. You step over a stone, the rough surface of it familiar beneath your sandal, and continue down a path that leads you to the heart of the empire's economic power. The equestrians. Their name might sound like something from a long-forgotten era, but in truth, they were one of the driving forces behind Rome's success. A class of people whose wealth came not from noble birth, but from trade, commerce, and the military. They were the bridge between the elites and the working classes, neither patricians nor plebeians, but something else entirely. Their lives were lived in the middle ground between the power of the Senate and the sweat of the fields. You can see them now, dressed in tunics of finer fabric, moving with a sense of purpose through the marketplace. They're not as flashy as the patricians, but their clothing still marks them as a step above the average Roman citizen. Their faces are often hard to read, reserved, businesslike, but there's a certain confidence in their step. They don't have the luxury of sitting in Senate meetings or lounging in gardens all day. Instead, they're often in the field, negotiating deals, conducting trade, or managing the vast networks that made Rome the thriving hub it became. Imagine for a moment the life of one of these equestrians, a man named Gaius. Gaius is a wealthy merchant who has made his fortune trading in grain, olive oil, and wine, three of the empire's most valuable commodities. His days are spent in the forum, where he meets with other merchants and politicians, striking deals that ensure his success. In the evenings, he returns to his villa on the outskirts of the city, where the walls are adorned with the spoils of his travels, exotic silks, intricately carved statues, and the finest wines from across the empire. Historians still debate whether the equestrian class was ever truly part of the aristocracy, or if they remained forever on the fringes of Roman nobility. Some argue that they were the true engine of Roman prosperity, while others contend that they were always looked down upon by the upper echelons of society. Still, there is no denying that they wielded significant power, both in the Senate and in the military, and they were often instrumental in the rise of the emperors. But what's most interesting about the equestrians, and what truly sets them apart, is their ability to navigate the fine line between wealth and power. They were often the ones who managed the empire's most profitable enterprises, controlling the flow of goods and wealth throughout the empire. They may not have been senators, but they were often the ones who could make or break a deal that could change the course of history. It's ironic, isn't it? The ones who were least concerned with the politics of Rome often had the most influence over its fate. In fact, if you look closely at the bustling city around you, you can almost hear the quiet negotiations taking place, silent but powerful. The equestrians may not be the ones in charge of the empire, but they're certainly the ones who make it run. As you walk past them, you can hear snippets of conversation, talk of grain prices, wine shipments, the latest political intrigue in the Senate. These men and women are the lifeblood of Rome's economy, and though they may not be the most visible members of society, their presence is everywhere, and as you continue down the street, you can't help but feel a little like Gaius, caught somewhere in the middle of this vast, complex world, navigating the space between the wealthy elites and the everyday worker. Now, as the evening deepens, let's take a moment to reflect on the nature of power in Rome. It wasn't always about the sword, the empire, or the army. Sometimes It was about money. It was about control, influence, and the ability to shape the world in ways that most people would never understand. The equestrians, in all their quiet dealings, had mastered that. And it's a strange thing, isn't it, that the most powerful people in Rome were often those who never made it into the history books. The sky darkens, the last hues of purple and orange slipping away into the velvety blue of night. The streets are quieter now, but the sound of footsteps still echoes off the walls, soft but steady. You walk along, the cool evening breeze brushing your face as you pass through a section of the city where the grand villas and marble columns give way to something more humble. The homes here are smaller, the streets narrower, the voices louder as families gather in their modest homes, talking, laughing, and living. Here, among the plebeians, life is different. These are the people who built Rome, who worked its fields, who fought its wars, and who, despite their place in society, shaped the empire as much as the patricians ever did. The plebeians are the heart of the city, the ones whose labor makes the city run, but they are often the last to be recognized. Imagine, for a moment, the life of a plebeian woman named Livia. She lives in a small apartment with walls that are more clay than stone and floors that are rough beneath her feet. Her days are filled with the mundane tasks of running a household, fetching water from the public fountain, preparing meals from whatever scraps she can afford, and caring for her children. Her husband works as a laborer, building the very roads you walk on, his hands rough and calloused from the work. Historians still debate how much social mobility existed for the plebeians. Were they simply bound by their birth, or did they have the ability to climb the social ladder? Some argue that the plebeians had more opportunities than we give them credit for, citing examples of plebeian families who rose to power through politics or military service. Others suggest that the plebeians were stuck in a cycle of poverty, never able to break free of the social system that kept them in their place. But for Livia, such debates are meaningless. She doesn't care about politics or power. All she wants is a better life for her children, a life free from the constant struggle of making ends meet. And while she may never sit in the Senate or wear the finest clothes, there's a certain strength in her existence. She and people like her are the backbone of Rome. They are the ones who make the empire function, the ones who carry the weight of the city on their shoulders. And yet, despite their importance, the plebeians were often overlooked and underestimated. They were the invisible class, the ones who worked tirelessly to keep the city running while the elites dined and made decisions that affected their lives. It's a bitter irony, isn't it, that the people who gave everything to Rome often received nothing in return. But still, the plebeians fought. They fought for their rights, for better treatment, for the chance to rise above their station. They formed the backbone of Roman military campaigns, served as soldiers, and took part in the political life of the city, demanding that their voices be heard. It was the plebeians who pushed for the establishment of the tribunate, a political office that gave them some power in the Roman government. It was the plebeians who demanded the right to marry into the patrician class, the right to hold office, the right to be heard. And while they may not have held the highest positions in Roman society, the plebeians Struggle for equality and justice became one of the defining features of Rome's history. They were the silent force that, over time, changed the course of the empire. So, as you continue your walk through the quiet streets, think of Livia and all the plebeians like her. They may not have had the riches or the titles of the patricians, but they had something just as valuable: the power of the people, the power to shape Rome, to fight for their rights, and to leave their mark on history. The night deepens, the sky now dotted with countless stars. Rome, though vast and ever busy, has quieted once more. The distant murmur of the city's activities seems to settle, allowing the faintest sounds of nature to creep into the atmosphere. Somewhere far off, a dog barks, and in the silence between breaths, you can almost hear the soft patter of rain on the rooftops, though the skies are clear. As you walk along a less traveled street, the smooth cobblestones beneath your feet begin to change texture, rougher in places, as if history itself is underfoot, blending the present with the past. Ahead, you spot a small shop, its door ajar, revealing a dimly lit interior where a man is busy cleaning his wares. He glances up at you briefly, his face thoughtful, but his demeanor calm. He doesn't look like a merchant of the highest order. No toga or grand garments here. He's dressed simply, but his eyes shine with a sense of pride, as if he's earned every penny of his modest livelihood. This man, you can tell, is a freedman. Freedmen, those once bound by the chains of slavery, are now moving through Rome in ways that few would have imagined years ago. While they're often treated as second-class citizens, there's something undeniably powerful about their presence. They've lived through hardship, survived the worst, and now they're quietly weaving themselves into the fabric of Roman society. Historians still debate how free a freedman really was. After all, freedom in Rome was more complicated than a simple release from a master. Freedmen could own property, conduct business, and even rise to a position of power, but they still carried the stigma of their past. They were citizens, yes, but not quite equals. Some even argue that they could never fully escape the shadow of their former lives as slaves, no matter how much wealth or influence they accumulated. Take a moment to imagine the life of this freedman, whom we'll call Decimus. Decimus was born into slavery, perhaps on a farm outside Rome, working under harsh conditions for a master who had little concern for his well-being. But Decimus had a sharp mind, and he learned quickly. By the time he reached his early 20s, he had gained the trust of his master, not just as a laborer, but as a personal assistant. He had learned to read and write, two skills that were rare among slaves. One day, perhaps out of generosity, or more likely because Decimus had proven himself useful, his master freed him. But freedom was not a reward. It was a new beginning, filled with struggle. Freedmen, like Decimus, had to forge their own way in a society that still viewed them as little more than former property. They were often excluded from the social circles of Rome's elites, but their ambition was undeniable. Decimus now works as a scribe, using his literacy to assist in legal matters, write letters, and keep records. Slowly, but surely, he's built a small fortune. But though he's free, his past as a slave still lingers. Whispers of it can be heard when the wind shifts, carried in hushed tones from the corners of the streets. But let's be real for a moment. No one ever said freedom would be easy. It's a strange thing, isn't it, that the ones who fought hardest for their freedom often found themselves still bound by invisible chains, whether it's because of the deep-rooted stigma or the societal structures that confine them. Freedmen like Decimus had to navigate a world where, no matter how much wealth or power they amassed, they were still seen as other. Even so, Decimus continues to climb, and in time, he may reach a level of success that will allow him to finally feel fully accepted by the rest of Roman society. Yet, in many ways, Decimus's story is one shared by thousands of freedmen throughout the empire. These individuals, despite their previous hardships, contributed significantly to Rome's growth. They worked as tradesmen, soldiers, and artisans, laying the foundation for the empire's economic success, though few ever recognized their impact in the grand narratives of history. It's hard not to feel a sense of quiet admiration for people like Decimus. They've known the depths of despair, and yet here they are, walking alongside the very same streets that were once the domain of those who ruled over them. They've made it. Maybe not in the ways the patricians have, but they've made it nonetheless. And that, in the end, is the story of the freedmen, an untold chapter in the grand epic of Rome. Section 6. The complexities of Roman citizenship. The night has fully settled now. The streets are bathed in a silvery glow, lit only by the soft flicker of torches and lanterns hanging from posts. The city feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for the next day to begin. You move further along, your steps slow and deliberate, as you navigate through the quieter streets of the city, where the patricians' grand villas give way to smaller, simpler homes. But as you walk, you're reminded of the complexities that lie beneath the surface of Roman society. For in a city like this, where status and power are everything, not everyone is considered equal. In fact, even those who were born in Rome, who spoke the language, and who lived under the rule of the same laws, could find themselves in very different circumstances, depending on the specific class they were born into, or more specifically, whether or not they were Roman citizens. Roman citizenship was a coveted prize. It granted rights and protections that non-citizens, known as peregrini, could never enjoy. Roman citizens could vote, could own property, could even hold office, while peregrini were excluded from these privileges. It wasn't just a matter of legal status, it was about belonging. Citizens were Romans through and through, those with the power to change the empire, to reshape the future. But not all citizens were created equal. Patricians, with their ancient bloodlines, held the highest status in society, followed by equestrians and plebeians. But what about the rest? Those who lived on the outskirts of Roman society, still bound by the rules, but not truly part of the ruling class. What about those, like the Latin rights holders, individuals who had some of the rights of a Roman citizen, but not all? Historians still debate the significance of Latin rights. Some argue that it was merely a stepping stone toward full Roman citizenship, a way for the empire to incorporate its growing territories without granting them full citizenship. Others suggest that it was more than that the Latin rites provided a distinct identity, one that allowed for a level of autonomy, yet still tied them to Rome. And then there were the Peregrini, the freeborn, non-Roman subjects of the empire, scattered across its far-flung provinces. Though they were not Roman citizens, they still felt the weight of Rome's laws, its reach, and its influence. Yet they were outside the Roman social hierarchy, on the periphery, with limited rights and opportunities. The struggle to obtain Roman citizenship was a fierce one for many, but it was not always guaranteed. The complexities of Roman citizenship are fascinating, aren't they? A system that set the citizens of Rome apart from everyone else, but within that group still left room for a kind of hierarchy. It's almost as if there were layers within layers, like the city itself, with its grand structures towering over the streets where common people walk. Even in a society that prided itself on order, there was always room for more inequality. But let's not get too bogged down in the legalities of citizenship. After all, the people of Rome were more than just legal definitions. They were men and women, some born to power, others fighting for the smallest scraps of it. And in the end, whether you were a citizen or a non-citizen, a freedman or a patrician, you were still part of this empire. You were still walking these streets, breathing the same air, living in the same world. And that, in itself, was an accomplishment. The city now feels stiller than before. As the night lingers longer over the rooftops of Rome, you hear the rustle of a breeze between the columns of a nearby temple, as though the whispers of centuries past are still echoing through the streets. The warmth of the evening sun has faded, and the air is cool and peaceful. But there's a sense of tension in the air, a quiet anticipation, as though something significant is always just around the corner in this city. As you move further through the city's heart, you begin to notice the difference in the buildings. The homes are grander now, more imposing. This is where the patricians live, the aristocratic elite of Rome. The homes are decorated with rich marble, and the statues standing in courtyards are exquisitely crafted. Even in the quiet of night, you can sense the power that emanates from these structures. This is where the decisions of the empire are made, where the future of Rome is shaped, and where the lives of the common people are often discussed without their consent. Of course, patricians are the oldest and most respected class in Roman society. Their names, inherited from the earliest days of the city, are known throughout the empire. They are the landowners, the senators, the military commanders, and the religious elites. In many ways, they are the face of Rome, the ones who project an image of power and prestige to the rest of the world. And yet, as you walk through these grand streets, you get the sense that there's something isolating about their wealth and position. They move through their world with a sense of entitlement, untouched by the struggles of the lower classes. They dine in their villas, while the plebeians toil in the fields, and the slaves work in their kitchens. Historians still debate how much power the patricians actually held in the later years of the Republic. With the rise of the plebeians and the increasing importance of the equestrian class, did the patricians lose their grip on Roman society? Some argue that the patricians maintained their influence through their control of religion and military command, while others suggest that their hold on power gradually slipped as the needs of the empire became more complex. You can almost imagine the life of a patrician in one of these grand homes. Picture a man named Quintus, a member of one of Rome's oldest families. His home is as vast as a palace, with rooms adorned in the finest silks and furniture imported from across the empire. He spends his days overseeing his vast estates, his evenings filled with political meetings, and his nights in luxurious banquets with other patricians. His life is one of luxury and privilege, but there's a certain coldness to it. The weight of his name, the responsibility that comes with his status, can sometimes feel like a burden, even as he enjoys all the fruits of his position. And yet, for all his wealth and power, Quintus, like most of his class, is still caught in a battle for influence. The political landscape of Rome is ever-changing, and the struggle for power is relentless. Patricians must constantly maintain their influence in the Senate, fight for their right to hold office, and ensure that their families remain at the top of the social hierarchy. It's a delicate balance, and no one, not even the most powerful patrician, can afford to rest on their laurels for too long. But despite this constant pressure, the patricians live in a world of comfort. They are the ones who decide the laws, who dictate the policies that affect the lives of the plebeians and the freedmen. Their decisions ripple through the empire, creating waves of change that can alter the course of history. And yet, for all their power, they remain deeply detached from the struggles of the lower classes. It's as if the walls of their grand homes are not just physical barriers, but also symbolic ones, separating them from the reality of Roman life that exists outside their gates. As you walk through these streets, you can't help but feel the weight of their legacy, the centuries of tradition and privilege that have been built upon the backs of so many others. But there's also a certain sadness to it. The patricians are at the top of the social ladder, yet their world is confined to a narrow circle of power and influence. Their lives are defined by duty, expectation, and the constant need to maintain their status. In many ways, their privilege is their prison. The city grows quieter as you continue your walk, but the grand villas of the patricians stand as silent monuments to Rome's enduring power and inequality. The moon is high now, casting long shadows over the streets as you find yourself walking along a path that leads to one of the most famous landmarks in Rome, the Colosseum. The air is cool, and the sound of your footsteps is muffled by the distant cries of the city's night creatures. You can hear the faint hum of voices, the sounds of the streets, but they seem far away now, as though you've entered a different world altogether. Ahead of you stands the Colosseum, the great amphitheater that has become synonymous with Roman power and spectacle. This is where the people of Rome gather to watch gladiators fight for their lives, to witness battles of skill, strength, and blood. The arena is quiet now, its grand arches and stone walls looming in the moonlight, but you can almost hear the roar of the crowd, the clashing of swords, and the cries of the wounded. It's a haunting sound, one that reverberates through time. You step closer, your feet crunching softly on the gravel path that leads to the entrance. The Colosseum, though silent, seems to pulse with an energy that's impossible to ignore. It's a symbol of Rome's greatness, of its ability to entertain and control, to capture the imagination of its people and turn them into spectators of violence. Gladiators, these men, many of whom were slaves or prisoners of war, fought in the arena for the entertainment of the Roman people. Some were skilled fighters, trained in the art of combat, while others were forced into the arena with little more than the will to survive. Their lives were brutal. Their fates often sealed the moment they stepped into the arena. Historians still debate the true role of the gladiators in Roman society. Were they simply tools of entertainment, or did they serve a greater purpose in maintaining the control and order of Roman society? Some argue that the gladiatorial games were a form of propaganda, a way to remind the people of Rome of the empire's power and dominance. Others suggest that they were a way to satisfy the bloodlust of the Roman populace, to give them a sense of release from the pressures of daily life. But whatever their purpose, gladiators were the stars of the show. Their lives, though often short and violent, were lived under the glare of the spotlight, their every move scrutinized by a crowd that cheered for bloodshed. Some gladiators became famous, their names known across the empire. Others faded into obscurity, their lives forgotten as soon as they were over. In the end, the gladiators were more than just entertainers. They were symbols of the power of Rome, of its ability to dominate, to control, and to entertain. They were the ultimate expression of Rome's greatness, and at the same time, the ultimate reminder of its cruelty. As you stand before the Colosseum, you can almost feel the weight of the history that has played out within its walls. The cheers, the screams, the blood, it all lingers in the air, a testament to the power of Rome and to the sacrifices made by those who were forced to fight for their lives. It's a sobering thought, but one that is part of the story of Rome, a story that is as much about power and domination as it is about spectacle and survival. The air has turned colder now, and as you walk past the massive stone structures of Rome, you notice the quiet rustle of leaves as they fall from the trees, carried by the wind. The city is still alive with its pulse, but there's something different tonight. A lingering calmness hanging over everything. The faint glow from the torch-lit streets gives the entire city an ethereal quality, as though you've stepped into a dream where the past and the present coexist side by side. As you move further into the heart of Rome, you find yourself near one of the ancient temples, its grand columns standing tall against the night sky. The Temple of Saturn, perhaps, or the Temple of Jupiter. Both are reminders of a time when religion, like everything else in Rome, was closely tied to power. In this city, gods and men were inseparable. They shared a bond, one that was deep, sacred, and foundational to Roman society. In the early days of Rome, religion was something of an all-consuming force. Temples were built not just for worship, but to demonstrate the greatness of the Roman people. The gods were considered direct patrons of Rome's power, and their favor was crucial for the success of the empire. But the divine was not a distant, abstract concept. It was embedded into daily life. The Romans believed that the gods were present in every action, from the grandest to the most mundane. Imagine yourself, centuries ago, walking through this same street, You can hear the prayers of the people, the murmur of incense, filling the air as sacrifices are made to the gods in hopes of a prosperous harvest or victory in battle. Every decision, from the fate of generals to the construction of roads, was preceded by rituals, sacrifices, and auguries. The Romans believed that the gods' approval was essential to everything they did. Historians still debate the true role of Roman religion in the shaping of the empire. While some see it as an essential part of Rome's identity and expansion, others argue that it was more of a political tool designed to keep the masses content and unified under a single cultural banner. The powerful priesthoods had held sway over religious life were often composed of patricians who wielded both religious and political power, sometimes making the line between faith and governance almost non-existent. The story of Rome's religious hierarchy is as complex as the city itself. The highest priests, such as the Pontifex Maximus, held immense sway not just over the spiritual lives of the people, but over Rome's political decisions. The pontiffs, augurs, and vestal virgins were figures whose influence extended beyond the temple walls, shaping the very fabric of Roman governance. But in these quiet moments, when the city sleeps, it's almost impossible to imagine the scale of their power. Instead, all that remains are the crumbling stones, the weathered statues, the faint smell of incense that still clings to the temples, as though the past itself is holding on to this sacred space. As you stand there, surrounded by these ancient relics, a thought lingers in your mind. The gods of Rome may no longer be worshipped in the same way today, but the structures they created, the temples, the ceremonies, the very idea that the divine and the mortal were intertwined, still hold a certain allure. They were reminders of Rome's belief in its eternal greatness, its divine right to rule the known world. Perhaps that's why, even now, Rome's shadow stretches long across history. It was a city built not just by men, but by gods. And in the minds of the Romans, this divine favor was what made the empire immortal. The night deepens further, and the moon is now a silvery crescent in the sky, casting a soft, quiet light over the city. The streets are mostly empty, save for a few late-night wanderers, moving like shadows beneath the columns. There's a sense of finality in the air now, as though the city is preparing to rest, its grand story paused for only a moment. You step onto a new street, and this one feels different. It's quieter here, yet the weight of history is almost palpable. Ahead, you notice the faint outlines of a training ground, a place where the echoes of swords clashing, shields crashing, and boots pounding against the dirt still seem to reverberate through time. This is the legacy of Rome's greatest strength. Its military. The Roman army was a machine, precise, ruthless, and incredibly effective at conquering lands far beyond the city's hills. Roman soldiers, or legionnaires, were the backbone of the empire. They weren't just warriors, they were builders, engineers, and the enforcers of Rome's will. The discipline of the Roman army was legendary. It was said that a Roman soldier was never off duty. He was always ready, whether for battle or for a moment's rest. Every soldier, no matter his rank, was expected to uphold the same standards of discipline, commitment, and loyalty. And those who served in the legions were not just soldiers, they were Roman citizens, given land and pensions for their service, a reward for their sacrifice. You can imagine it now. Take a moment to think of one such soldier, a man named Lucius. Lucius was born in a small town on the outskirts of Rome, his family struggling to make ends meet. But Lucius had a dream. He wanted to join the legions. It wasn't just about the pay, although that was certainly part of it. Lucius wanted the honor, the prestige, and the opportunity to serve the great empire that was Rome. And so, at the age of 18, he enlisted. Historians still debate how much of the Roman army's success was due to their training and how much was due to their sheer numbers and tactical genius. Some believe the Roman army's triumphs were the result of carefully honed techniques, formations like the testudo or tortoise formation that allowed the soldiers to march into battle in a near impenetrable wall of shields. Others argue that the real strength of the army was the way it could absorb and adapt to new ideas, incorporating elements from conquered peoples into their tactics, weapons, and organization. But whatever the reason, Lucius thrived in the legions. He spent years fighting in far-flung corners of the empire, his training making him an invaluable part of his unit. And when the time came for him to retire, he was rewarded with a plot of land, something that, in the days of his youth, had seemed impossible. He returned to Rome, now a veteran, a citizen with a new status, and a hero in his own right. But Lucius's story, like so many others, is a testament to the true power of Rome's military, its ability to shape not just the borders of the empire, but the lives of its soldiers. The Roman army wasn't just about conquest, it was about transformation. For men like Lucius, it offered the chance for advancement, a new life beyond their origins, and an eternal connection to the empire that they had helped build. Yet, as you stand in the quiet of the training grounds, you can't help but think about the costs of Rome's greatness. It's easy to celebrate the victories and the soldiers who marched into battle with their heads held high. But behind every triumph, there were countless lives lost, soldiers who never returned home, families torn apart by war, and an empire that, for all its glory, was built on blood and sweat. As the quiet moonlight casts long shadows across the empty training grounds, you're reminded of the power that lies behind every great empire, the military that fuels it, the soldiers who sacrifice for it, and the price that must be paid for greatness. It's a price that Rome, for all its grandeur, was always willing to pay. The night is now deep, the streets almost empty, except for the occasional distant sound of footsteps echoing off stone, a soft reminder that Rome never truly sleeps. The city feels like it's at rest, the rhythm of life slowed, yet you can sense the ever-present hum of its historical pulse, as though the very walls are alive with memories. The cool night air wraps around you, and the sound of a dog barking in the distance is almost comforting, familiar, a reminder that life here, even in the heart of the empire, is ever-changing and yet timeless. You find yourself walking toward a grand structure, not quite as imposing as the Colosseum, but still impressive, the Circus Maximus. The faint glow of lanterns flickers from its entrance, where the echoes of cheers and the sound of horses' hooves have long faded but seem somehow to linger in the air. The circus was once the center of entertainment for the masses, a place where Roman citizens, both rich and poor, could escape the troubles of daily life. It was here that the grand chariot races were held, a spectacle that had a way of uniting the empire, if only for a moment. In Rome, entertainment was not a luxury, it was a necessity. The idea of bread and circuses had become ingrained in Roman culture, a promise from the government to the people. We will feed you and we will entertain you. In exchange for this, the common people, the plebeians, would be content. This idea of appeasing the masses with food and entertainment helped maintain social order. After all, if you can keep the population distracted and fed, they're less likely to question the power structure or the inequality that pervades every aspect of Roman life. Historians still debate how much this system of appeasement truly kept the peace, or if it was merely a way to suppress the discontent that often bubbled beneath the surface of Roman society. The phrase bread and circuses itself comes from the poet Juvenal, who lamented how the Roman citizens were easily pacified by free food and entertainment, a population more concerned with spectacles than with the political realities of their lives. But there's a certain irony in it, isn't there? The very people who built the empire were, in many ways, treated like children, fed, entertained, and then forgotten. The rulers of Rome, particularly during the later years of the Republic and the Empire, understood the power of distraction. They knew that a populace satisfied with bread and circuses would be less likely to rise up against the system that kept them in their place. Let's take a moment to imagine the scene here at the Circus Maximus. You're standing at the edge of the track, the smell of dust in the air, and the sound of chariot wheels thundering by. The crowd roars as horses pull their chariots at full speed, turning the corners with hair-raising precision. The tension is palpable as bettors place their wagers, hoping to strike it rich. For the citizens of Rome, this was not just a race, it was the very heart of their entertainment, an event that brought together the common man and the elite, all united by their love of spectacle. It wasn't just the races, though. The gladiatorial games, animal hunts, and public executions were all part of this great circus culture. These were the events that filled the stomachs and minds of the Roman people. Some, like the gladiators, fought for their lives in the arena. Others, like the criminals and slaves, fought for a chance at freedom or survival. In this world of extremes, the masses gathered in the Colosseum or the Circus Maximus, eating their bread, cheering for their favorites, and never once questioning the price paid for their entertainment. You can almost hear the cheer of the crowd as they watch the chariots careen around the track, the dust rising in clouds, the air thick with excitement and tension. The politics of the day, the concerns of the plebeians, are forgotten for a time. This is their world, a world where the emperor's power is on display, where the forces that shape the empire are cloaked in the veil of entertainment. It's easy to see how the rulers of Rome understood the power of spectacle. They weren't just giving people what they wanted, they were controlling them, distracting them from the hardships of life and the inequality that defined the empire. But while the spectacle captivated the masses, it left something unsaid. The very idea of bread and circuses is a quiet acknowledgement that something is amiss, that beneath the surface of all this joy, there is a deeper, more troubling truth. For all the grandeur of the races, the gladiators, the games, there was a harsh reality in Rome that the entertainment never addressed: the inequality, the oppression, the struggle of those who did not have access to the very entertainment that pacified the masses. In the Circus Maximus, only a few could claim victory, while the rest, like the plebeians and slaves, watched from the stands, their lives dictated by forces they could not control. Still, you can't help but feel a sense of awe as you stand there, staring at the vastness of the circus. In some ways, it was a symbol of Rome itself, a grand display of power and control, masked as entertainment. It's strange, isn't it? The Romans, who built one of the greatest empires in history, were able to keep their society intact by feeding their people, entertaining them, and keeping them distracted from the real issues that lay beneath the surface. Now, as the sound of the distant crowd fades into the night, you realize that this is the Rome that most people never see. It's the Rome that runs beneath the surface of the city, hidden from view. The bread, the circuses, the games, it all seemed so simple, so easy. But in reality, it was the empire's way of making sure that nothing ever truly changed, that the masses would remain content while the ruling class carried on their business as it had been for centuries. As you walk away from the grand structures of the circus and toward the quieter quarters of Rome, the streets feel even more intimate. The moonlight casts long shadows on the narrow alleyways, and you can hear the distant murmurs of families gathering around their homes, whispering, laughing, living. The grandeur of the Circus Maximus fades behind you, replaced by the simple life of the common people, the plebeians, the artisans, and the laborers who form the backbone of the city. This is where life in Rome gets interesting. The places that the emperors, the senators, and the wealthy elites rarely see. You pass by small shops where blacksmiths hammer away at their anvils, their tools clanging in the night air. The scent of freshly baked bread rises from a nearby bakery, making your stomach rumble, a reminder of the basic needs that drive the daily rhythm of life here. Life for the common people of Rome was a constant cycle of work and rest, survival and striving. The urban poor had little in terms of wealth or status, but they were the lifeblood of the city. Without their labor, Rome would not have run. Without their skill, the buildings would not have been built, the roads would not have been paved, and the markets would not have been stocked. Historians still debate how much the commoners understood the political structures that governed their lives. Were they simply cogs in the machine of Rome, content to go about their daily business while the elite handled the empire's affairs? Or did they, too, have a hand in shaping the empire in ways that are not always visible in the historical record? It's a tough question. The truth is, the lives of Rome's common people were often overlooked in favor of the great battles, the grand politics, and the high drama of the emperors. Yet in these quiet streets, In the homes of the plebeians, there is something undeniably powerful. Despite their lack of status, despite their difficult lives, they still managed to create a city that would stand the test of time. In their hands, Rome was built, and in their hearts, its future was forged. The city may have been dominated by the rich and the powerful, but it was the commoners who kept it alive. One brick, one loaf of bread, and one story at a time. As you continue walking through the heart of the city, you feel a connection to these people, a connection to the roots of Rome that stretches back to the very beginning. They are the forgotten heroes, the ones whose stories are rarely told, but whose lives shape the empire more than anyone else. And in the stillness of the night, as the city fades into sleep, you can almost hear the faint hum of their work echoing across the centuries. The moonlight grows softer as you walk, casting gentle shadows over the cobbled streets. Rome, ever present in its contradictions, is both quiet and alive. You can almost feel the hum of the city's past beneath your feet, the struggles, the victories, the lives lost and won. The weight of history presses in on all sides. Now, as you pass another grand building, the haunting memory of the arena returns to you. The Colosseum, its grandeur echoed in the empty streets as you remember the blood spilled there, the glory and the horror. As you walk deeper into the heart of Rome, your thoughts turn to the gladiators, those men and women whose lives were defined by the blood-stained sand of the arena. They were heroes in the eyes of the people, yet slaves in the eyes of their masters. For them, life was a constant battle, not just for survival, but for glory, honor, and sometimes freedom. The Roman arena was a place of spectacle, a place where life and death met in a brutal contest that captivated the people. Gladiators fought for the entertainment of the crowd, their every move cheered or jeered by thousands. Some came from noble backgrounds, volunteering for the games to gain fame and riches. Others were slaves, forced into combat, their fates determined by the whims of their masters. These fighters were not just warriors, they were actors in a grand spectacle where the stakes were life and death. The Romans were captivated by the games. They saw them not only as a test of strength and skill, but as a symbol of Roman might. The gladiatorial contests were a celebration of Rome's power, and their spectators, whether rich or poor, gathered to witness the triumph of Roman virtue over the forces of chaos. The roar of the crowd, the clash of weapons, the sound of shields breaking under the pressure of a blow. These were the sounds of the Roman spirit on full display. You can almost hear the cheers of the crowd as a gladiator, his armor glinting under the sun, stands victorious in the arena. His chest rises and falls with the weight of his victory, but it is a hollow triumph. For every victory, there are hundreds of deaths, some swift, some slow, but all with the same inevitable conclusion. The gladiators, for all their strength and courage, were still at the mercy of the system that created them. Their victories were fleeting, their fates sealed by the whims of the emperor, the crowds, and the gods. Historians still debate whether the gladiatorial games were primarily about entertainment, or whether they served a deeper, more symbolic role in Roman society. Some suggest they were a way to maintain social order, a reminder of the emperor's power and control. Others argue that the game served as a way to bond the people together, providing a common experience that united them in the shared enjoyment of spectacle. Regardless of the reasons, the gladiatorial games remained a vital part of Roman culture for centuries. But what of the gladiators themselves? Were they heroes, or were they simply tools used by the empire to control and pacify the masses? You can imagine the life of a gladiator named Decimus. He was once a prisoner of war, captured in battle, and forced to fight for the entertainment of the Roman crowds. His days were spent training in the harsh conditions of the gladiator school, his nights filled with dreams of freedom that seemed impossible to achieve. And yet, despite the brutality of his life, Decimus found a sense of purpose in the arena. For him, it was not just about surviving. It was about proving himself. He fought not just for his life, but for his honor. In the arena, he became a symbol of Roman strength, his body marked with the scars of battle. For a brief moment, he was more than a slave. He was a gladiator, a hero to the people. His name was known throughout Rome, his victories celebrated in the streets. But it is not just the victors who are remembered in the arena. The losers, too, are part of the story, their deaths marking the price of Rome's glory. In the blood-soaked sands, there is no distinction between master and slave, noble and commoner. Everyone is equal in the face of death. The gladiators' struggle is not just physical, it is a fight for their very soul, a battle to retain some semblance of humanity in a world that sees them as mere tools for entertainment. As you stand in the quiet of the night, the image of the arena lingers in your mind. The gladiators, with their strength, their courage, and their unyielding resolve, fought not just for survival, but for the honor of Rome itself. In their struggles, they embodied the very spirit of the empire, a mixture of brutal power and fleeting glory. They were the true warriors of Rome, their fates sealed by the empire that birthed them. The night air grows chill, the city quiet, as the weight of the evening presses in on you. As you move deeper into the city, your thoughts shift. The grandeur of Rome's power, the struggles of the gladiators, the triumphs and tragedies of the empire. These are the stories of men. But what of the women? What role did they play in this vast, complex society? Rome was a city of warriors, politicians, and rulers, but it was also a city of women. Though their stories are often overshadowed by the deeds of their male counterparts, the women of Rome were defined by their relationships to the men who held power, fathers, husbands, and brothers. But while their roles were largely confined to the home and the family, they were not without influence. Women like Livia Drusilla, the wife of Emperor Augustus, wielded power behind the scenes, shaping the course of Roman history with their intelligence and cunning. Livia was not a soldier, nor a politician in the traditional sense, but her influence was undeniable. She maneuvered through the complex web of Roman politics, using her position to ensure the safety and prosperity of her family. Through her, the Julio-Claudian dynasty solidified its hold on power, and her children Tiberius and Drusus would go on to rule Rome. But Livia's power was never explicit. She operated in the shadows, her influence hidden behind the public image of her husband, Augustus. Women in Rome were expected to be the epitome of virtue and modesty. They were mothers, wives, and daughters responsible for maintaining the stability of the Roman family. The concept of pudicitia or chastity was a cornerstone of Roman femininity. A woman's worth was often measured by her virtue, her ability to remain pure and devoted to her family. Yet, despite these limitations, Roman women were not without power. They could own property, inherit wealth, and, in rare cases, wield political influence. Historians still debate the exact role of women in Roman politics. Some argue that women had little to no direct influence, while others suggest that their influence, though subtle, was essential in shaping the course of Roman history. Women like Agrippina the Younger, who would later become the mother of Emperor Nero, used their family connections to amass power. Through their marriages and offspring, these women could steer the course of the empire. But despite their occasional influence, the majority of Roman women were confined to the domestic sphere. Their lives were centered around managing the household, bearing children, and supporting their husbands. The roles they played in Roman society were often invisible, their stories hidden in the shadows of the men who dominated the public stage. Yet, there is something undeniably powerful about their position. While the men fought wars and made laws, it was the women who held the empire together. They were the silent forces behind the men of power, the ones who ensured the continuation of the family line, the ones who quietly shaped Roman society through their actions and decisions. Even in their apparent passivity, Roman women had a lasting impact on the empire, their influence far more subtle and far more pervasive than history often gives them credit for. As you walk through the streets of Rome, past the grand homes and the temples, take a moment to reflect on the women who lived here. Their lives may not have been recorded in the annals of history as the men's were, but they, too, were part of the story, the quiet, powerful force that sustained the empire through centuries of change. The city around you is still, the cool night air brushing past your skin as you wander through the quieter streets. The shadows grow longer now, stretching across the city like memories of a past long gone. You can feel the weight of centuries pressing in around you, each step an echo of the past. The grandeur of Rome is undeniable, but as you walk through its heart, a lingering question remains. How did this mighty empire fall from its position of power? The answer, in many ways, begins in the very heart of Rome itself, the Senate. It was in this body, made up of men whose names are still remembered in history, that the seeds of Rome's decline were sown. The Roman Republic, once a shining example of political stability and civic virtue, began to crumble under the weight of corruption, inequality, and the ambitions of men like Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus. Historians still debate the exact causes of the Republic's collapse. Some point to the growing inequality between the classes, with the rich growing ever wealthier, while the plebeians struggled to make a living. Others argue that the expansion of the empire created a system that was too vast to govern effectively, leading to instability and chaos. But perhaps the most significant factor was the erosion of the political system itself. The Senate, once a place of collective decision-making, became a battleground for personal ambition and power. As you walk through the ancient streets of Rome, you can almost hear the arguments of the Senate, the clash of voices, the rise and fall of political power. In this very city, men like Caesar would rise to power, promising reforms and glory, only to seize control for themselves. Their ambitions, once aligned with the good of the Republic, would soon turn to self-interest as they sought to amass more power, more land, more influence. The Republic, built on the ideals of shared power, was slowly transformed into a system where the will of the people was secondary to the whims of the ruling elite. Julius Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon in 49 BCE was the symbolic death of the Roman Republic. His decision to march on Rome, his former home, with an army loyal only to him, marked the beginning of the end for the Republic. By the time Caesar was assassinated in 44 BCE, the damage had already been done. The idea of shared power was no more. The Republic was dead, and in its place stood an empire ruled by a single man, a dictator in all but name. Historians still debate whether Caesar's rise was inevitable, or whether it was the result of the collapse of the old Roman order. Did the Republic fail because of its own flaws, or did men like Caesar simply take advantage of a broken system? Perhaps both are true. What is clear, however, is that Rome's political landscape had changed forever. The Senate's once proud role as the voice of the people had been usurped by the ambitions of men who cared little for the Republic's ideals. Rome was no longer the democracy it once had been. As you walk through the streets, it's impossible not to feel the echoes of this shift in the air. The remnants of the Republic, its ideals and institutions, are still present in the marble columns and grand buildings, but their power has faded. In their place, the towering statues of emperors, the reminders of the imperial system, now dominate the city. The Republic, with its complex system of checks and balances, is nothing more than a memory, a cautionary tale for future generations. But even in its decline, the Republic left behind a legacy, one that would shape the empire for centuries to come. The political struggles, the rise and fall of great men, and the debates over power would continue long after the Republic had crumbled. The empire that rose from its ashes would carry the imprint of the Republic's ideals. Even as it abandoned them, the Senate would still exist, but its power would be but a shadow of what it once was. The people, once the heart of Roman politics, would be relegated to the sidelines as emperors ruled with absolute authority. In the stillness of the night, as you walk through the streets of Rome, it's hard not to feel a sense of sadness for what was lost. The Republic, with all its flaws, was a system that allowed for a balance of power, where the people had a voice, however imperfect. The empire, by contrast, was a machine of conquest and control, where the will of the emperor was absolute. And as the city sleeps around you, you can't help but wonder what might have been had the Republic survived, had its ideals been preserved. But in this city of marble and stone. History marches on, indifferent to the dreams and struggles of those who came before. As the night deepens, a soft breeze sweeps through the city, carrying with it the scent of the Tiber River. The streets, though quieter now, still hum with the rhythm of life. An empire, vast and sprawling, stretched across the known world. The city of Rome, at the heart of it all, feels as though it exists outside of time. The grandeur of the Forum, the majestic arches of triumph, the towering statues of emperors. These monuments, though silent, speak of an empire at the height of its power. You find yourself standing in the shadow of one such monument, the Arch of Titus, a triumphal arch commemorating the victory of the Emperor Titus in the Jewish War. It is a symbol of Rome's might, its ability to conquer and assimilate the peoples of the world into its empire. But as you stand beneath its towering arch, a thought lingers in your mind. For all its conquests, for all its triumphs, Rome was also a city of peace. Or rather, it was a city that experienced peace for long stretches of time, a period that would come to be known as the Pax Romana. The Pax Romana, or Roman peace, was a period of relative stability and prosperity that lasted for about 2 centuries, from the reign of Augustus 27 BCE to that of Marcus Aurelius 18 CE. It was a time when Rome's borders were secure, its economy flourished, and its people experienced a level of peace and prosperity that had been unheard of in the ancient world. Under the Pax Romana, trade flourished, infrastructure was built, and the empire's vast territories were connected by roads, bridges, and aqueducts. For the average Roman, life during the Pax Romana was comfortable, if not luxurious. There was food in the markets, jobs for the working class, and entertainment in the form of gladiatorial games, aeronaut races, and theatrical performances. The empire seemed to be at peace, at least on the surface. But of course, beneath the calm exterior, there was always the tension of maintaining control over such a vast and diverse empire. The peace of Rome came at a price: military discipline, imperial control, and the ever-present threat of rebellion. Historians still debate how peaceful the Pax Romana really was. While it is true that the empire enjoyed long periods without large-scale wars or invasions, there were still plenty of smaller conflicts, both within the empire and on its borders. The Pax Romana was not without its challenges, but for many, it represented the height of Roman civilization, an era where the empire was at its most stable, its most prosperous, and its most powerful. As you stand in the shadow of the Arch of Titus, you realize that the Pax Romana was not just a political or military achievement. It was a symbol of Rome's ability to bring order to chaos, to create a system that spanned the known world. The roads you walk on, the aqueducts that supply the city with water, the very infrastructure of Rome, all of these were products of the peace that the empire brought to its lands. And while the Pax Romana may have been imperfect, it was still a time when Rome was at the height of its power, when the empire was united, when people felt a sense of stability and security. In the stillness of the night, as you look up at the arch, It's easy to imagine a time when the city of Rome truly was the center of the world, when its empire stretched from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Mesopotamia. For a brief moment, you can almost hear the echoes of the past, the sound of chariots racing through the streets, the cheers of the crowd at the gladiatorial games, the rustle of soldiers marching in formation, and in the silence, you realize that this peace, this stability, was a rare thing in history, a fleeting moment in the grand sweep of time. The air grows colder as you stand beneath the stars, the distant sounds of the city still reverberating, but now quieter, as if Rome itself is in a deep, meditative sleep. You step along the streets that once witnessed the rise of the most powerful figures in history, emperors whose very names would echo through the centuries, shaping the destiny of the world. Rome's transformation from a republic to an empire was not just a shift in political structure, it was the birth of a new kind of power. The emperors, starting with Augustus, represented the pinnacle of Roman ambition, not just ruling the city, but the entire known world. The Republic, with its complex checks and balances, had given way to the absolute power of a single man, a ruler with the final word on all matters of state. This shift was both inevitable and deeply consequential. The reign of Augustus marked the beginning of the Roman Empire, and with it, the era of imperial rule. Augustus, originally known as Octavian, cleverly manipulated the existing power structures, consolidating control over the military, the Senate, and the people. His rule was disguised as a restoration of the Republic, but in truth, he was the first emperor, and his reign marked the beginning of a new era, one where the emperor's power was absolute. Augustus ushered in a period of stability and prosperity, but his rule also set the tone for future emperors, many of whom would use their power not to maintain peace, but to expand the empire's borders, to enrich themselves, or, in some cases, to simply indulge in extravagance. Historians still debate how much of Augustus's reign was truly focused on the welfare of the Roman people, and how much was about consolidating his personal power. Some argue that he was a master of political strategy, using diplomacy, military might, and the appeasement of the Senate to cement his rule. Others point to his creation of a political system that allowed the emperor to rule unchecked, laying the foundation for the despotic emperors that would follow. Imagine the life of Augustus as he stands before the Senate, his face calm, but with eyes that conceal the ambition that drove him. He was a man who would stop at nothing to secure his vision of Rome, a Rome ruled by a single man. His actions were subtle at first, almost imperceptible to the casual observer. Over time, however, he would become Rome's first true emperor, leading the empire into a new age where the power of the emperor was unquestioned and his will became the law of the land. As you walk deeper into the heart of the city, you're reminded of the many emperors who followed Augustus, each one leaving a mark on the empire, some more benevolent than others. Some, like Tiberius, Caligula, and Nero, would fall into the grip of madness, using their absolute power for self-indulgence and cruelty. Others, like Trajan and Hadrian, would expand the empire to its greatest extent, leaving behind a legacy of military conquest and architectural wonders, historians still debate the role of the emperors in the long-term success of Rome. Were they the empire's greatest asset, providing stability and strength, or did their concentration of power sow the seeds of Rome's eventual decline, as corrupt and ineffective emperors brought the empire to its knees? It's difficult to say, but what's undeniable is that the emperor's reign marked a shift from the collective decision-making of the Senate to the rule of a single man whose will determined the fate of millions. As you walk through the ruins of the Forum, the place where the Senate once met to debate and discuss the future of Rome, it's hard not to feel the absence of the ideals that once guided the Republic. The emperors, for all their greatness, were not the guardians of liberty. They were the rulers of an empire, and their power was absolute. In this new world, the fate of Rome lay in the hands of a few, and it was not always a benevolent rule. But even in the shadow of this power, Rome remained a symbol of ambition. It was a city where dreams were realized, where emperors rose from humble origins to shape the destiny of the world. The empire may have been ruled by a single man, but its success was due to the strength of its people, the legions that fought for it, and the infrastructure that connected its vast lands. It was a system that, for all its flaws, allowed Rome to thrive. And as you stand there, beneath the ruins of the ancient Senate, you can almost feel the weight of that power pressing in on you. The power of the emperor, the power of Rome. The city may have changed, its glory fading into the past, but the legacy of the emperor still lingers like the silent presence of the gods. The night has grown even quieter, and as you walk through the ruins of the city, the weight of history seems to rest heavily on your shoulders. Rome, the great empire that once stretched across continents, now lies in pieces, its streets and buildings crumbling into dust. The sound of the wind through the trees is the only reminder of a city that once was. The grandeur of Rome, its marble columns and towering structures, may still stand, but they are mere echoes of a time long past. The fall of Rome is a story that has captivated historians, scholars, and dreamers for centuries. It is a tale of a city that reached the peak of power only to crumble under the weight of its own ambition. The empire that once ruled the known world was slowly, inexorably undone, and as you walk through the darkened streets, you can't help but wonder what went wrong. Historians still debate the causes of Rome's decline. Some point to the empire's overextension, its inability to manage its vast territories. Others argue that the decline was caused by internal decay, corruption, economic collapse, and a breakdown in social order. There are those who suggest that the very nature of the Roman system, with its concentration of power in the hands of a few, made it vulnerable to collapse. Still, others believe that Rome's fall was a result of a loss of civic virtue, as the people became complacent, more concerned with their own pleasure than with the future of the empire. Whatever the cause, the fall of Rome was not a single event. It was a slow unraveling, a process that took centuries. The decline began in the 3rd century CE, with the empire facing increasing pressure from external invaders, economic instability, and internal strife. The once mighty legions, stretched thin across the empire's vast borders, could no longer defend Rome from the barbarian tribes that began to encroach on its territories. The Goths, Vandals, and Huns began to chip away at the empire's borders, and by the 5th century, Rome itself was under siege. In 476 CE, the last Roman emperor in the West, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer. This event, often marked as the fall of the Western Roman Empire, signaled the end of an era that had lasted for over 1,000 years. The Eastern Roman Empire, centered in Constantinople, would continue for several more centuries, but the mighty Empire of Rome, at its height, the ruler of the known world, had fallen. As you stand in the ruins of the city, it's hard not to feel the weight of that loss. The empire that once spanned continents, that created roads, aqueducts, and cities, that built a civilization unlike any other, is now reduced to rubble. But even in its decline, Rome's legacy endures. Its ideas, its culture, its architecture, these things live on, passed down through the centuries, influencing the world long after the empire itself has crumbled. The fall of Rome is a reminder that even the greatest of civilizations is not immune to the passage of time. Empires rise and fall, but the ideas they leave behind can shape the world for centuries to come. And as you walk through the streets of Rome, you can almost feel the ghost of the empire that once was, lingering in the air like the faintest whisper of a dream. The moon is now high in the sky, casting long, serene shadows across the ruins of Rome. The city, bathed in silvery light, seems to be holding its breath, as if it's remembering everything that it once was. The wind whispers through the ancient stones, and the stillness of the night allows the echoes of history to resonate in every corner, every ruin, every piece of marble scattered across the landscape. It's as though the very city is reaching out to you, reminding you that while the Roman Empire may have fallen, its influence has never truly left. Standing here, surrounded by the remnants of a civilization that spanned over a millennium, you can't help but wonder, what remains of Rome? What did the empire leave behind? And how did it shape the world we live in today? The answer, as it turns out, is more than you might expect. Rome's legacy is everywhere, woven into the fabric of modern society, both in the things we use every day and in the very way we live our lives. It's in our language, our laws, our architecture, and even in our understanding of politics. The Romans were master builders, creators of a world that was as complex as it was magnificent, and the structures they left behind continue to influence us in ways both obvious and subtle. First and foremost, the Latin language, the very lifeblood of Roman civilization, has had an enduring impact on modern languages. Latin, though no longer spoken as a vernacular, forms the foundation of the Romance languages: Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian, and its influence extends even to English, where many of our words and phrases are rooted in Latin. The words you speak, the phrases you use, the expressions you hear, they all have roots that trace back to the language of the Romans. Even in the quiet stillness of the night, you can feel the presence of Latin lingering in the air. The Romans also gifted us with their ideas about law and governance. The concept of Roman law, with its focus on justice rights and legal protection, laid the foundation for modern legal systems. The very idea of a citizen's rights, the concept of private property, and the notion of trial by jury, all of these have their origins in Roman legal traditions. The Roman approach to law was built on a foundation of equality before the law, though, of course, the ideal was often far from reality. Still, the framework that they established continues to influence how we understand and uphold justice today. And then there's architecture, perhaps one of the most tangible legacies of Rome. The grandeur of Roman engineering still captivates us, whether it's the simple beauty of Roman arches, which became the cornerstone of later architectural designs, or the massive aqueducts and roads that allowed the empire to thrive. Today, we see the influence of Roman architecture in government buildings, bridges, and even in the design of our modern cities. The Roman commitment to engineering and construction continues to guide our efforts to build lasting, sustainable structures. But Rome's influence is not only confined to the material world, its political ideas also resonate deeply in the way modern governments function. The Romans created a system of governance that evolved from the Senate to the emperorship, and though it was far from perfect, it provided a blueprint for future political systems. The idea of the Republic, where power is shared among elected officials and where the people have a voice, found its way into the hearts of many revolutionary thinkers centuries later. Rome's transition from a republic to an empire, with its complex relationships between leaders, citizens, and military power, has been studied and replicated throughout history. The balance of power, the role of military authority in politics, and the dynamics between public and private interests, all of these issues continue to shape our modern political discourse. Historians still debate whether Rome's legacy has been a force for good or for ill. Did the empire's rise mark the beginning of a new era of civilization, or did it sow the seeds of future conflict, tyranny, and inequality? Certainly, the empire's legacy is complicated. Rome was a city built on conquest, and its greatness came at the expense of millions of lives. It ruled with an iron fist, and while it brought stability and peace to its citizens, it did so through military force and oppression. Yet, even in its imperfections, the Roman legacy offers us profound lessons in governance, law, and civilization. As you stand in the shadow of Rome's ruins, you realize that its true legacy lies not just in the buildings and artifacts, but in the way the ideas of Rome have shaped the modern world, from the words we speak to the laws we follow, from the structures that define our cities to the political systems that govern our lives. The fingerprints of Rome are all around us. The empire may have fallen, but its spirit endures in every corner of the world, reminding us that even the greatest civilizations are not immune to time, and that the stories of the past continue to shape the future. The night has fully settled now, and the city is calm. The wind, now a gentle breeze, sweeps through the ancient streets, rustling the leaves of the trees that have stood for centuries. As you continue your walk, the soft glow of lanterns on the streets illuminates the path ahead, a symbol of the enduring light of Rome's legacy. The city may be quiet, but its heartbeat is still alive in the pulse of the world today. The air is still, the moon casting a soft glow across the ancient stones as you stand at the edge of the Roman Forum. The ruins of the city stretch out before you, their jagged edges softened by the night, as if the city itself is taking a long, slow breath. Rome may no longer be the empire it once was, but its presence lingers here, in the stones, in the columns, in the stories of the people who lived and died under its watch. Rome, the eternal city, was once the center of the world, a place of unimaginable power, grandeur, and glory. But the city, like all great empires, has been shaped by time. It has seen wars triumph and tragedies. It has endured the rise and fall of rulers, the clash of armies, and the changing tides of history. Yet, through it all, the city remains a testament to the ambition, the determination, and the vision of those who built it. As you stand there, gazing out at the ruins, it's impossible not to feel a deep sense of awe. The city is no longer the bustling center of the empire, but it is still a living, breathing monument to the past. The ruins, though weathered and worn, are still beautiful in their own way, silent witnesses to the greatness that once was. In the distance, you can hear the faint murmur of the modern city, the sounds of life continuing on, but the spirit of ancient Rome, with all its grandeur and flaws, is never truly gone. The fall of Rome may have marked the end of an era, but it also marked the beginning of a new one. The ideas and ideals of Rome live on in the world today, in the laws we follow, the governments we build, and the cities we inhabit. The legacy of Rome is one that continues to shape our lives, even in the quiet moments when we stop to reflect on the past. As you walk away from the Forum, the night is still and peaceful, and the city around you sleeps. The story of Rome, however, is far from over. It lives in every stone, every column, every crack in the marble, and every whisper of the wind through the ruins. Rome may have fallen, but in many ways it is eternal, and its legacy will continue to live on long after the last stone has crumbled. For Rome was not just a city, it was an idea, a dream, and that dream lives on in the hearts of all those who still believe in its greatness. And so, as the night deepens and the stars shine brightly above, you find yourself at peace, knowing that Rome, in its eternal glory, will continue to inspire and guide us long after the empire has faded into history.